If you've watched my previous videos, you know I'm a huge proponent of both flexible dieting as well as talking about the importance of making sure your diet is sustainable. However, I've noticed a trend lately where people are worrying so much about sustainability that they actually can't reach their goals. So today I want to show you how to balance the sustainability side of things as well as doing the hard work to reach your goals. And I also want to talk about flexible dieting, some of the negatives to it, and how if done wrong can actually work against you. Hey, this is Colin DeWaay. If you want to master your metabolism and create forever results, start now by subscribing and click on that bell notification so you don't miss anything. Okay, here's the thing about sustainability. I want to start there and then we'll go into flexible dieting later. And the thing is, I really do feel like sustainability is why so many people constantly yo-yo diet for years, because they just do something extreme just to get the weight off, don't think about how well they're going to be able to keep doing it long term. So once the diet's over, they either go back to their old eating habits or they feel so restricted from that extreme dieting, they binge like crazy, especially on top of your hunger hormones being out of whack from the dieting, your metabolism being slow. This is why it can be so easy to overeat and regain that weight and even more than you even started with. And frankly, this is why I find flexible dieting so effective, because without banning certain foods and telling yourself you can't have them, it helps create a healthier relationship with food and makes it easier to stick to your diet long term. Remember, to keep your results, what you do has to be a lifestyle, and chances are eliminating all your favorite foods is probably not something that's going to be a good lifestyle for you. But here's the thing, sometimes focusing too much on sustainability can keep you from reaching your goals, because let's face it, no matter what, you're going to have to do some things you don't want to do. Just because sustainability is important doesn't mean that the whole process is going to be easy. In fact, I can pretty much promise you it's not going to be. Especially the leaner you get and the closer you get to the goal, the more sustainability kind of goes out the window a bit. Because let's face it, at a certain point, your calories are going to get low, your activity is going to get high, and the thing you have to remember going through this final push is that it's temporary, right? You're not going to be doing this for the rest of your life. There will be a time that will come where you're going to go through the reverse diet, you're going to start getting your calories up, start getting your cardio down, and the more sustainable side of things will be coming. So you don't necessarily want to stop yourself from doing things in the short term that are going to be somewhat unsustainable, because especially as calories get lower, you're just going to have to be more restrictive by nature. At least if you don't want to be starving all the time, you're going to want to be eating mostly nutrient dense whole foods, foods that help you feel full and help you perform and feel better. And the big thing to remember here is it's a choice you're making and not something you have to do. Personally, I feel like the psychology behind feeling like you don't have a choice is part of why people rebel against their diet. Whereas if you realize it is your choice and you can either do it or not do it, it's easier to accept. Remember, your goals are your responsibility and your responsibility alone, so you have to accept what it's going to take to get there and understand that it's not all going to be rainbows and butterflies, but that doesn't mean it has to be all suck, and it shouldn't feel like punishment all the time either. I just don't want you to stop yourself from reaching your goals because you feel like what you're doing isn't something you can do forever. You're not going to have to, at least the more extreme stuff, but you do always have to put in effort, and there's no such thing as being completely done. Okay, now as far as flexible dieting goes, there are a lot of misconceptions about this, and the first thing I want to say about it is flexible dieting and tracking macros are not one of the same. They certainly can be, there's certainly a component to it for sure, but there really isn't a true definition. If I was to give it a definition, it would basically be to allow yourself to be flexible with your diet, like that's simple. I do like not looking at foods as either good or bad, or at least at a minimum not looking at them as bad, because this can set you up for an unhealthy relationship with food. And seriously, there's no morality in food. If you have some cake at your kid's birthday party, you didn't do anything wrong, you're just living life. We all need to learn how to include food into our lives because food is a big part of our lives. So yes, flexible dieting can be, in fact, learning to include different types of foods, interchanging foods within a certain macronutrient intake, but it's also being flexible with your diet in all things in life, including life events and just your mood in general and a lot of different things without falling into the all or nothing approach. Sometimes having untracked meals or even untracked days, creating ranges within a week that you can try to stick to instead of specific numbers. It can be tracking calories and protein without worrying if you do more carbs or more fat. Hell, it can be not tracking at all, but not constricting yourself to certain types of foods. It can be a lot of things, but what it's not is being perfect with your macros every single day and freaking out if you're even the slightest bit off. Because there's really not much flexible about that, and honestly is kind of like eating disordered behavior, and sometimes people who have a past history of eating disorders go to this approach, and it can definitely cause binging and restricting behavior if you're not careful. Now with that said, occasionally somebody will say that I like to be perfect with numbers, I really enjoy it, I'm a numbers person, it's kind of like a puzzle and I really like it. That's fine, I have no problem with that, especially if you're going to stick to it long term, then that's great. But what I find is a lot of times these same people, when they find themselves in situations that are out of their control, maybe they're going to a restaurant, maybe they're going to a party, maybe somebody else is cooking their meal, they completely freak out that they don't have the control, and now they go into binging behavior because they feel like, well, I don't know what it is anyways, what's the point? If that's you, then you need to check yourself, because there's a large difference between liking numbers and feeling like you have to be perfect, and if you're not, then there's no point. But seriously, I have no problem with any kind of diet that anybody likes to follow and then they can do long term. And you also have to understand, however, every single diet known to mankind is some form of restriction. Keto restricts carbs, paleo restricts processed foods, vegans restrict animal sources. The restriction of tracking macros is more diligently tracking. That's a form of restriction. So the key is you have to find a diet that feels the least restrictive for you, and that's going to be different for everyone. And no matter what, when you're going through a dieting phase, your calories are going to be restricted. You can't just eat whatever you want in whatever quantities you want and expect to see results. I wish it worked that way, it would be nice, but that's just not how it works. For me, I like flexible dieting with tracking macros because it just allows me to be more flexible with my approach of certain types of foods and be able to include them in my diet, know that I'm still within my calorie range, know that I can still see the results I want, and it helps me not feel quite so restricted. The other benefit I've found to tracking macros is how much it teaches you about food. You learn so much when you spend a good amount of time tracking, looking at different types of foods and seeing what's in it, looking at what portion sizes look like and things like that. It teaches you so much. And it allows you to get to the point where you can be more intuitive with your approach because you've built the knowledge base first. But if you've never done this, then you're just kind of looking at foods as either good or bad or right or wrong. And that's not usually going to be a good approach for most people. I've actually gotten to the point now where I do very little tracking anymore unless I'm going into a hard cut. But that's because I have years of experience in tracking. So it's easier for me to keep myself in a certain range without feeling like I have to be quite so diligent. At the same time, something I find with a lot of people is they can kind of try to blame tracking a little bit in terms of, well, I stopped tracking because it was just too much and I couldn't handle it anymore, when the real reason was not necessarily the tracking. I mean, it could be, I'm not saying it never is, but a lot of times it's they're just tired of controlling their diet. They want to eat whatever they want in whatever quantities they want, and they stop tracking so they can do that. Well, there's a big difference between not tracking and still eating relatively the same. You've built that knowledge base now, you know what you normally look like. If you stop tracking, just eat similarly. If it's to stop so you can just eat nothing but pizza and donuts and ice cream, well, then we have to kind of think about things and understand where you're coming from here. And a lot of this, as I've already mentioned, really comes down to the all or nothing mentality so many people have. No matter what style of dieting you have, it's so common to feel like if I'm not perfect, then what's the point? I just might go totally off the rails. And this is just a hopeless cause if you have this mentality, because I promise you the all or nothing mentality will always end in nothing. By the way, I did mention in this video that sometimes to reach your goals, you're gonna have to be more aggressive than you'd like, and a lot of people are afraid to lower their calories because they're either afraid of metabolic damage or whatever else. So if that's you, I want you to check out this top video next, and I'll explain if you can go lower than you think and what to watch out for. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.